Snow drifted across the valley in slow, thoughtful swirls, as if the winter itself were deciding who deserved mercy and who did not. Wyatt Hale stood just outside the general store, his gloved hands buried in his pockets, his breath rising in steady bursts that looked too much like the sighs of a man who had spent years with no one waiting for him. He wasn't a loud figure in town, never had been, but something about the day pulled his gaze toward the crossroads where travelers passed through and where the lonely sometimes stopped to remember they existed. That was where he saw her. Mei Lian moved through the snow like a shadow that had lost its owner. Her steps were careful, the way a person walks when they no longer trust the ground to hold them. She clutched a small trunk against her chest, the wood worn smooth from years of carrying more sorrow than belongings. A thin shawl clung to her shoulders. Flakes gathered on it, as if the sky itself were trying to hide her. She didn't look up, not even when people paused to stare at her, not even when a few whispered her name like it. Was a warning. Wyatt knew the whispers well. The Chinese widow. The miner's wife he never should have married. She ain't got anyone left. That's the truth of it. Pain recognized pain. Wyatt felt it in the tightness of her shoulders, in the way she shrank from every doorway, and in the empty ring on her finger where love once lived. She walked as if every step demanded permission. Mrs. Calloway's voice sliced through the hush of the snowfall. Poor girl should have stayed with her own kind. This is no place for her. Wyatt wasn't a man who interfered in other people's trouble, but something twisted inside him. An old ache he had long kept still. He remembered nights alone in his cabin, the silence settling like frost in his bones, the creeping fear that life could end without anyone ever truly knowing who he was. Watching Mei Lian struggle through the cold felt like watching a reflection of himself wander away. She reached the edge of town and stopped, staring at the road that stretched toward nothing but white mountains and deeper cold. Wyatt stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Ma'am," he said quietly, hoping not to startle her. She lifted her head, and for a moment he saw the truth behind her silence, fear, grief, and a quiet strength she seemed too tired to wield. He cleared his throat. "You look like you're headed someplace you ain't meant to walk alone." A flicker of hesitation passed through her eyes. "I have nowhere else," she whispered, her voice thin but steady. "My husband is gone, and the landlord said I must leave." It was the simplicity of her words that struck him, not the tragedy of them, though there was plenty of that, but the way she spoke them like she had rehearsed this moment, knowing no one would step forward. Wyatt looked at the road again, then at her shaking fingers clutching the little trunk. "The snow'll turn you to ice before you make it to the next ridge." "I am not wanted anywhere," she murmured, "but the cold doesn't care who I am." Something in him cracked. A gentleness he'd buried after too many betrayals rose like a stubborn ember. The words came out rough, awkward, almost desperate. "Pack your things," he started, then realized she already held them. He swallowed hard. "I mean, come with me. I need a wife, and you need a husband." The world seemed to still. Even the snow paused midair. Her eyes widened, not with insult, but with disbelief. He wished he had said it better. He wished he had looked less like a man begging for a place in someone's life. She didn't answer at first. Wyatt's face flushed with regret, but he forced himself to keep his shoulders square. He wasn't offering ownership. He was offering refuge. Two souls standing on the edge of the same cold cliff. "I don't want you to be alone," he said softly. "And I don't want to be alone either." She blinked, unsure whether to trust him. Her breath trembled in the air. "People will talk." "They already do," he replied, his voice dropping to a low certainty. "Let them." Behind them, the town murmured with curiosity and suspicion. A few men exchanged glances. Mrs. Calloway's lips tightened with disapproval. The sheriff stood on the boardwalk, arms crossed, reading the moment with a weariness that suggested he'd already seen too many lives ruined by pride and prejudice. Wyatt extended his hand. It hung there in the cold, a strange offering. Not romance, not duty, but an invitation to step out of the snow and into something neither of them had words for yet. Mei Lian didn't take it right away. She looked past him at the empty road, then back at the cabins flickering with lamplight. She seemed to weigh the cruelty she knew against the hope she wasn't sure she deserved. At last she whispered, "I have nothing to bring." "Good," Wyatt said. "Then we can start with the same amount." A wind swept between them, carrying away the last of her doubt. She placed her hand into his, cold, trembling, but alive, and the touch startled them both. There was no spark of destiny, no sudden rush of love. There was only relief, quiet and warm, like a faint fire in a long-abandoned hearth. Wyatt lifted her trunk and motioned for her to walk beside him. She followed slowly, unsure, glancing at the ground with each step. The town watched in heavy silence. A few men whispered disapproval. Others shook their heads. The sheriff frowned thoughtfully, but said nothing. Wyatt led her toward his cabin at the edge of the ridge. Snow creaked under their boots. The world felt fragile, suspended, as if it were offering them one chance to choose a different kind of life. At the cabin, he set her trunk down gently by the door. The fire inside glowed soft and inviting. "This isn't much," he admitted, "but I'll treat you right." Mei Lian stepped in cautiously, her eyes darting from the hearth to the wooden cot to the simple table. She touched nothing. She moved with the quiet grace of someone conditioned to walk without leaving a trace. Wyatt lit an extra lantern, wanting the room to feel warm for her. She watched him from the corner, still unsure if she belonged. Before either could speak, boots crunched outside. A voice called, "Wyatt, step out here." Wyatt stiffened. He knew that tone, righteous, nosy, dangerous in its own lazy way. He opened the door. A small gathering of townsmen stood in the swirling snow, some clutching lanterns, others simply glowering. Mrs. Calloway hovered behind them like a crow guarding a secret. One man stepped forward. "You talk Keener in?" Just like that. Wyatt felt the heat rise in him, the old shame trying to return. He forced it down. She wasn't going to survive the night. "That ain't your burden," another spat. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "It is if I say it is." The sheriff raised a hand before tempers rose further. "Everybody go on home. Ain't nobody's place to judge who a man chooses to help." Mrs. Calloway muttered something sharp under her breath, but she turned away. The men followed, reluctantly breaking apart as the cold drove them back into their own lives. Only the sheriff lingered a moment longer, giving Wyatt a long look, half warning, half respect, before nodding once and walking off. Wyatt returned inside, shutting the door on the last of the voices. Mei Lian stood by the hearth, arms folded close to her chest, eyes soft with worry. "Did they come because of me?" "They came because people fear what they don't understand," he said. "But they won't bother us again." For a moment neither moved. The fire crackled. Snow whispered at the windows. Something unspoken hung between them, a fragile trust, barely formed, but real enough to keep the cold at bay. Wyatt took a slow breath. "You're safe here." Mei Lian lowered her gaze, but a faint warmth touched her expression, as if she had finally stepped out of a long night. Outside, the storm eased. Inside, two strangers stood at the threshold of something uncertain yet promising. The moment was quiet, but it held the weight of a beginning. And though neither said aloud, both felt the truth. Their lives had started changing the moment they reached for each other in the snow.